Please note that the views, information, and opinions expressed during Safety Leaders Now are solely those of Joe Meadows and Kirwin Lalla and do not necessarily represent those of Sysco Canada and its employees.
Hey, before we get started here, I just want to let you know that as a little thanks for listening, my company's offering listeners to this podcast some free software. So if you want to learn more about that, we have some more details at the end after the interview. Alternatively, track me down on LinkedIn and I'll have a pinned post at the top of my profile. Just search for Joe Meadows and we'll take it from there. All right, let's get started. Hi there, this is Joe Meadows and welcome to Safety Leaders Now, the show where we cut through the noise and identify the strategies and tactics that today's top safety leaders use to keep their team safe. On today's episode, we have Kirwin Lalla, Director of Health and Safety for Sysco Canada. Now, before we talk any more about Kirwin, I just want to quickly introduce Valeria, who is the producer for this podcast. Val, can you say hi?
Hello, everybody.
Val, can you very quickly tell our audience what it is that you do here on the show?
I help Joe produce Safety Leaders Now. I take care of finding all of these great guests that we've had on the show and walking them through the process, getting them to talk to Joe, and then helping to build all of the assets that you see on social media.
For anyone listening, that's how much work it takes to get someone to talk to me. We have somebody doing this almost full time. So a shout out to Val for when she says helping me produce the show. The reality is that she does all the work and I just show up for these calls. So thanks to Val for producing all this great content.
It takes two.
Val, as you know, you set everything up. On today's episode, we have Kirwin Lalla. You sat in on the interview. Have any thoughts on this conversation as a non-safety professional?
Yeah, I thought it was great. As Joe just mentioned, I don't do anything in safety, and yet I found that I personally learned a lot from Kirwin. He came extremely prepared. There's a lot of things that I can take away and use in my own personal life and in my work life. So I'm excited for all of y'all to dive in and give it a listen.
As a marketeer, Kirwin mentioned a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini, which I'm a huge fan of and incredibly influential for anyone in any position, but particularly in marketing. So I'll be following up with Val on that one and giving her some homework probably. But anyway, I just from my side thought this was an amazing episode. Again, Kirwin came with a ton of awesome notes. I think he did an awesome job of sharing things that are really tactical that I think people can really use to affect change in their organization, and not just in safety, but just to become better, more effective leaders overall. And I really think everybody's going to enjoy it. With that, let's move it on to the episode. Kirwin, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to get to know you a little bit and learn a little bit more about how you're approaching safety. So can you introduce yourself? Let us know who you are, where you work, all that good stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. So my name is Kirwin Lalla. This beautiful accent you're hearing, it hails from Trinidad and Tobago. And around 12 years ago, I decided to leave plus 30 degrees and come straight to Edmonton, Alberta, to some minus 30 degrees. I'm not crazy, I promise you. Better life, better family, love Canada. I'm a proud Canadian, I'm a proud Trinidadian. So people ask me, am I going to get rid of my accent? Never. I think it's beautiful. I bring a warm sunshine to everybody. I am presently the National Director for Environmental Health and Safety for Sysco Canada. Great organization. I must put in a plug. Great organization. Warehousing, distribution, logistics. Chances are you visit one of our fine restaurants. We are the people that support the restaurants, the healthcare facilities, the higher education facilities. Chances are we provide the products to the people who run those facilities. So that's what awesome. I do right now.
That sounds like fun. Now, can you give us a little, again, I've seen all the Sysco 18-wheelers driving everywhere. Can you give us a little bit of a feel for the scope of the organization and maybe additionally, if you could tell us a little bit about super diverse kind of set of factors that you're overseeing. So what within the scope of the organization, what are the things that are coming across your desk the most as it relates to kind of managing environmental health and safety?
Yeah, so multiple things. It's really diverse. So in Sysco, one of the main things that everybody see, the front facing thing, is the 18 wheelers with the huge Sysco logo. So transportation safety, obviously, it's critical for the business. It's dealing with the public. So that comes across my desk quite regularly, because I want it to come across my desk. I'm hypersensitive that, hey, we're interacting with these potential weapons in the hands of the wrong people. So we need to make sure our drivers are trained, responsible, follow the letter of the law, follow the organization compliance, and go from there. The second thing that comes across my desk a lot is warehousing operation. So we have, I think the correct term is warehouse athletes. It's a physical job. Hats off to the brave people who do that every day. But what comes with that is repetitive strains, injuries. It's a physical job. It's some heavy weight. Sometimes we can't control the size of that piece or box being moved. So we do multiple lifts and all of that, but it's still, it's day in, day out, that physical activity. Even the best athletes, the high performance athletes, they get soft tissue injuries at times. So that is something comes across my desk. It's not as significant, meaning in severity, but it's often, I feel a pain in my back. Okay, maybe we need to adjust your work for the day. You're feeling better, then you go back up to full speed. Another thing that comes across my desk is we use a lot of powered industrial equipment, so pallet jacks, forklifts, and that is in combination with people in our warehouse. So one of the things we have to make sure is the person on the pallet jack, they don't collide, or two pallet jacks don't collide, or the person is caught between one of these high racking and pallet jacks. So that comes across the desk. Another thing that people are not really aware of with Sysco or other large warehousing operations, that is powered by a process plant. It's huge refrigerated warehouses. And in some cases, it's Freon. Some cases, it's CO2. We're shifting to CO2. And other cases, it's ammonia. So we have ammonia power plants, small in nature, still powering the facilities. So that is a unique process safety risk that doesn't come across my desk often, which is great. But it's a process safety plan. So we have trained technicians and engineers who monitor and look at this process safety aspect. Those really are the main things that comes across my desk, in addition to, every day dealing with people, managing people, leaders, personalities, the cultural aspect.
For sure. That's super interesting. And I think, again, as we see those 18 wheelers drive by, I think that complexity probably gets lost on a lot of people. So what, as far as headcount, how big is the sort of organization you're overseeing here?
Yeah, so we are the Canadian division of Sysco. Our headcount is around approximately 4,500 associates in Canada. Sysco in general has close to 60 globally, around 60,000 people.
Interesting. So within that, I'm assuming that that kind of diverse nature of risk, 4,500 employees, you're not the only person on the safety team. What does that team look like? Where do you fall into that team? Who's reporting into you? Who are you reporting to?
Yeah, thank you for that. So it's a matrix responsibility. So if we say safety is the responsibility of the operational people, because they own safety, what we have is people guiding that process. So I report into our global person who sits in Houston. I also report into the president of Sysco Canada and his executive leadership team. So it's a hybrid role for me. The team that I manage across the country, it's divided into regions. So I have somebody in Atlantic Canada who reports into their regional president and then reports into me. So it's a dotted line thing. I have somebody Northern Ontario. I have somebody for Quebec, somebody in Southern Ontario because it's a large market. That person has a manager reporting into them. I have somebody who's in the prairies, and the prairies is comprised of Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, and Thunder Bay, Ontario. So that section. Then I have two people in Alberta because of the sheer geographical size and the distance of where we go. You know what? Yeah, so the geographical size in Alberta is unusual because we support into Calgary, Southern Alberta, Northern Alberta. So it's a lot of mileage, similar to Northern Ontario, but Alberta, there's a lot of driving. And then we have somebody in BC, and that person sees about Kelowna, Victoria, Vancouver.
Okay, awesome. So that's interesting. And again, sounds pretty complex. But maybe before we dive into this too much,
sure,
I want to take a step back. And as I told you before we started recording, I've been investigating you on the internet. What I want to understand, or I want to go back to the beginning. So my understanding here is that you might have started out in a maritime capacity. And as a former mariner myself, it's something I was hoping to learn a little bit more about. Is any truth to that?
I started working for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. So yes, I was on the ocean, I was on cruise lines. And then I started to work in offshore exploration, oil and gas. So yes, so I guess there's some truth to it.
Were those in a safety capacity, or that was just a different point in your career?
Different point in my career, but that is where safety started. So for cruise lines, I was a chef. But everybody's responsibility. You are responsible for passenger safety. And I did see the Poseidon Adventure, the Titanic. So in my mind, I was not going to die out there. So I would know how to launch the lifeboats, save everybody with me, fight the fires. And that is where safety originally started with me. And then going offshore, exploration, offshore oil and gas. Well, we're literally on a time bomb working. It's not away from the job. So that drilling operation is really near and dear to your head, to where you sleep. So there's a lot of safety initiatives, part of your responsibility. And I was in the food industry. So running the hotel operations for the offshore business, the offshore drilling business. So when we did that, you also have responsibilities. As a manager, you're responsible for evacuating people safely. You may have fire safety responsibilities. You have blowout responsibilities, that kind of thing. So what we did in doing that, somebody said to me, why? Because when you should get into safety, you have a knack with people and you follow these things. You should look into it. And I did. And I had some really good people coaching me and helping me along the way, and that's where the career started.
Gotcha. That's I guess maybe just for a little bit of context, I don't talk about it all that much anymore, but I actually have a unlimited master's license, and I worked in the offshore industry for a number of years where I got into safety. So I've done my fair share of fire drills and all that other stuff as well.
Yeah.
So when I saw this, I was intrigued. I'm always keen to swap sea stories with somebody. When you were doing that, was that largely in the offshore industry in Trinidad and Tobago?
Trinidad and Tobago and Gulf of Mexico. So I was part of a crew. We will actually fly to the US and either wet tow or dry tow the rigs down to Central South America, so off the coast of Guyana, Suriname, anywhere in the Gulf of Mexico, and yes, off Trinidad and Tobago.
And so I wanted to maybe prompt you here, and I haven't given you much warning, so
sure,
this might be a total dead end, but I know that for me, I've actually found that particularly with offshore, but I would say the maritime industry in particular, I've bumped into probably a higher amount of safety professionals who have some exposure to that world than you'd expect, because it's a pretty niche industry. And I was curious if, now, interesting, kind of full circle now being at Sysco, where it's you're connecting back with that catering capacity. Were there any stories that you can share about your time when you were either on the cruise ships or working in the offshore that were particularly impactful for you, especially in the way that you think about safety and occupational risk?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I did experience a hurricane on the cruise lines, but I'll be honest with you, I was a younger person back then, and I thought I could take on the world. So that was more fun than impactful. But offshore, I started to get a family, more mature, and I've seen my share of fires, blowouts, pressure vessels, pressure lines under pressure, separating and people getting injured. And what I realized in that capacity is, offshore is there's no room for error. Working offshore, it's the slightest error from any aspect, from a preventative maintenance side, from somebody who's not competent enough to do the job, taking shortcuts. There's no room for error. You pay and you pay it daily. My experience offshore, I think while it was unforgiving from a safety perspective, I think that brought out the best in all of us. It became a family. You literally live together, eat together, work together, and it's a personal responsibility for not safety of yourself, but safety of the person next to you. Organically grew, and it's solidified. I've never seen that in any other industry. That closeness where safety, you had safety leaders there, but safety was really me and the person next to me, and holding that person accountable. It wasn't following the rules, following the procedures. These things became natural to us. It was all about, Joe, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Come on, man. What's wrong with you today? You feeling okay? Let me help you with that. Because Joe is not just my co-worker. Joe is the guy that's living in the same room with me. So it really became our family.
Do you ever miss the, or at least personally, I sometimes miss the simplicity of that time in my life. When you're at work, it's only work. When you're at home, it's only home.
I do. People call me crazy and weird. I have spent I like working out in the middle of nowhere. Again, it wasn't in the North Atlantic where it's frigid. This is mostly Caribbean waters. So you get to see some unique things. I've seen a whale shark more than once, a beautiful creature. Seen some massive turtles. We've once been threatened by a country navy to get out of their waters. That was interesting and fun in a different way. But yeah, I miss the serenity of it, and the simplicity of it. Yes, I do. I do. It was a simpler time.
It's exactly. I'm sure at the time you were dying to get out of there, but there's something to it. I guess I want to just maybe take a step back here, because I think you've touched on some interesting points that I want to explore. So, you talked about this sense of accountability, and I think that's something that again I personally really relate to. I remember I started working on supply boats when I was 18, and being there and going to the gym, obviously because I'm an 18-year-old and that's appealing to me, but also I have a distinct memory of thinking, especially having leadership aspirations, people aren't just asking if you can be their manager. They're asking, if there's a fire, if there's something, are you going to be somebody who they can trust to, get a door open or do something like that in a real emergency? And I think with all that said, I think it forces you, or by necessity, you end up really looking at risk in a meaningful way and not just getting caught in something that I've seen more and more as my experience has expanded into this kind of compliance trap, where people see the goal of a health and safety department to simply be to satisfy an auditor. I think you get away from that quickly. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this may sound controversial, but that's okay. I don't apologize for it. The idea of compliance is important, but the idea of compliance as part of a bureaucracy is wasting people's time. People, even with this organization, I said my job is to focus on the significant risks. I'm not going to chase everything down. And why? Because the significant risk is what could really impact people, impact reputation, impact the society. So what I've told my team, I said, look, we're not here to check a box. Why are we here? We are here to enable the leaders, the operational leaders, empower them, make sure that they are enabled to get their people home safely. We are here to make sure that technically we understand the risk and the impact and severity. And if we manage through a risk-based system, and we tie that into the overall organizational objective of managing risk, because a business, that's what they do, they manage risk. I said, that is our job, that is our focus, specifically on operational risk when it comes to environment, health, and safety. So that I am fully integrated into that. Safety professionals who chase every little thing down for the sake of a checkbox compliance, you're wasting your time. You're not being effective. You're not being effective to the profession. You're not being effective to the people you work for. And most importantly, you're not being effective to the persons you are there to help protect, which is everybody and the society at large.
No, you've just said all the little buzzwords that I like to say. I could not agree with you more. Do you think that there's anything more than this mentality that you've brought from that experience? Is there anything that you've, I guess, since coming to Sysco, any changes that you've made to try and help people make that transition to thinking more about risk?
Yeah, I would like to think so. I have great leadership. The executive leadership team, since coming to Sysco, I've made my position very clear. When I came into the organization, I said I have to learn. Safety people have a way, and I'm a safety person, proud safety professional, but we have a way of coming to tell you that you're doing your job unsafe. I have no idea what your job is, but I tell you you're not doing it safe. And then the second thing, I guess all professions are not going to be too hard on us safety professionals. When you walk into a job, you want to make that impression. So you jump right in and you start to make a set of changes without actually understanding and listening to what is the issue. So what I did, I told my bosses, I'm going to listen. Some of you have been here for 20 plus years, 30 plus years. I have no insight to give to you. You guys have been around, this company has been around, you're doing a good job. My job, I'm going to listen and see how we can improve and what we need to improve on. And they gave me that opportunity to do that. And in doing so, I was able to objectively provide evidence, not speculation, but evidence using certain tools such as perception surveys, doing compliance checks to establish standards, bringing in an external objective auditor to look at key things, to hear from the people, look at our processes, and look at some of the operations we do. And they provided objective evidence as to what needed to be done and what are the areas of risk or significant risk, because we have risk all over the place. And in presenting that, my leadership, even my team, and my team was a bit skeptical, but the leaders were able to say, okay, great. Now we know what we need to have a concentrated focus on. And what I did to tie that all together, you have a fine group of salespeople generating business, going out front, delivering that promise we did as a customer. But what I did is really start to include the financial conversation. So one of the biggest tactics and tools, the Institute of Workplace and Health, they have an economic planner. And you could plug in all the information and they actually tell you how much more business you have to do. So they'll essentially do a profit effect analysis. And I did that. I did the math. I actually did some statistical calculation, provided some confidence intervals, so some boring stuff that apparently I like, because it's important. It's not that I like it. I rather spend time speaking with people. But what that did, that showed the entire organization how much more work we have to do to generate the same profitability. And that became a different conversation. So now you have frontline salespeople who would never have a safety conversation, now having that conversation. You have senior leaders who not really aligned with the operational, the lifting, the driving, the packing. They consider that as other. right? We know you guys do it. We're happy you guys do it, but it's not really my thing. Now they're starting to realize that, okay, if this doesn't happen, I have to do a whole lot more business, and that impacts me personally. So now I'm going to ask you, are you guys doing okay? Are we doing this thing safely? What could I do to help? So yes, it has changed and really refocus the entire leadership team on improving culture, improving leadership skills, engaging the frontline staff, asking the relevant questions that is important. How could we do this safer, more efficiently, still be productive?
And was that, so you mentioned that economic planner, was that the real catalyst for this change for you? Was that the kind of centerpiece?
Yes, and the perception survey. So the perception, how people feel. And we had a good rating, but what it kind of identified, and COVID had a lot to do with it. What it identifies certain things that we used to do as an organization that we no longer was doing to that effect. Meaning, COVID came, was all about compliance, keeping people safe, and it was the right thing to do. But there are certain things that we missed. And human beings are, very social people. So that social interaction gave the associates a perception that my manager, they don't talk to me as much, they don't recognize me as much. We still had a good percentage score, it was above 70% favorable, but though that was still lower, people still felt that, hey, we're not interacting. And when I shared some of that information, went back into the focus groups and say, hey, this is what you all said, this is how you felt, this is why we think this is. You had leaders and joint health and safety committee members saying, yeah, you know what, you're right. We did miss that, and now we have to improve that. But yeah, the catalyst from a leadership perspective, the money. We all have the risk. We know it's the moral argument, the legal argument, but the financial argument we often overlook. And I tell people, again, this may be a little off coming from me, safety is not a number one priority. The number one priority of an organization is to make money. How we do it is we need to do it safely. So you will never hear me walking around safety priority number one. No. Priority number one is achieving the objective. A byproduct of that is doing it safely, making sure we're profitable. And what I have done is tie that in. You cannot be a successful organization financially reporting to your shareholders and have a bad safety record. It does not work. Mm-hmm. So you're fooling yourselves. So them seeing that, even though they're very responsible, but putting in that financial piece, I had a leader ask me, Kirwin, why are you talking about the numbers? So because it's relevant. Well, we do this because it's the right thing to do, and so you should. But we also have to tie in the economic value of being safe. Mm. It has to be on the forefront of your minds as well. It has to be a balance, the legal, the moral, and the financial aspect. And now they understand. Now they get it. I have presidents, they call me all the time. They don't feel threatened. They don't think it's me coming to wag my finger. No. We now speak about it in terms of safety as an investment instead of safety as a necessary cost. Mm. That conversation has shifted, and I'm confident that that conversation has shifted, because now in their minds, they're seeing it as, how do I invest to improve safety, which will improve employee engagement, which will improve productivity. That's the change in conversation now.
Yeah, I think that ties so much. I've been talking, or I've found myself talking a lot recently about the kind of ISO definition of risk, the effect of uncertainty on objectives. And it sounds like what you're talking about here is making sure that conversation is always tied to those objectives, and that your team basically just exists to guide the decisions that remove that uncertainty. And correct. If you can articulate that to people, you're no longer the guy who's just walking around telling people to put on their safety glasses.
Yeah, that is not conversations that we have at all. It's strategic. It's around business practices, and enterprise risk. You know, that has been the focus. And for me, it's satisfying because we have, again, you have our conference last year. It was virtual, but we had a speaker, Professor Andrew Sharman. He is one of the modern voices of safety. He was the keynote speaker, talking about leadership and culture. He's out in Switzerland, and he was a keynote speaker, and I was a bit skeptical because this is keynote speaker for more, the sales people, the other leadership teams. And I have to say my president is a visionary, and he said, you know what, yeah, let's do it. I pitched it. He said, yeah, let's do it. Let's tailor the message. And I was a bit skeptical. I was wondering how will it be received? And I got a lot of feedback from vice presidents of merchandising, sales, those people, that category of associates who was like, this was amazing. Nobody ever talks to us about this. This was so refreshing. I'm like, okay, good. I'll take the kudos for it, but and after that, there was leadership building sessions, and it's the first session, the vice president of human resources, the national vice president, he said, the first session, I want you all to work on safety culture, the benefits of that to an organization. And that became part of the leadership development series for all leaders. And then again, great feedback. So the conversation, the mindset has shifted. The aha moment, I actually got back into the office last week, and I met, you don't see everybody, but I met some people like, hey, it's so nice to meet you. I'm like, yeah, I'm the safety guy. You're glad to meet me. Oh yeah, we like your message. And I'm like, okay, great. Feels good.
That sounds awesome. I think for anybody who's listening and is interested or not familiar with those tools, we'll make sure that economic planner is linked in the show notes if anybody else wants to play around with that. But I want to just circle back to that perception survey to try and make this tactical so that people can use some of this if they're interested in one thing. Was that a particular tool you guys were using? Did you run that internally? What did that look like?
Internally, and he's deceased now. Dr. Alan Cooley. I call him Dr. Alan Cooley. He's not. The Emperor Has No Hard Hat. It was a tool derived from what he had in that book. I've worked with it before, and it's something that I worked using his information, his tools. I developed the questionnaires, and we did it internally. One of the best books I've ever read, tactically.
And when you say internally, are we talking like you just created something on Google Forms? How did you actually get that?
Yeah, too. Yes, I use Microsoft Forms. Okay. And we did some old school, print out the forms and give it to we have truck drivers who don't want to use any technology, didn't want to use their phones.
Yeah.
And
you don't pay me to use my phone.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of, and you know what, they're right. We're not paying it to use your phone. We're not paying it to use data. But some people, I don't trust your phone. I don't trust it. You guys giving me a QR code and you telling me a form magically appears. Explain that to me. I'm not techno savvy, so I couldn't explain it to you. So they're like, yeah, no, I don't trust the form. If you give me a paper form, I'll fill it out. I'll put it in a box. I'll even give it to you directly, but I don't trust that digital media. And that was one of the feedbacks as well. We had people come and say, you know what, I would have participated more, but they rather that old school. Some regions did it like that, and we had higher participation. It just meant more work on the back end, which is fine. Yeah, we did that. We used some basic statistical tools in Excel and old school, understanding the mean, the population, calculating your confidence intervals to make sure that the stats are accurate. Because one of the things that I've seen in stats, people call stats, is they really don't do the math to really apply the stats. So you get a false reading. You have to understand what is your average response. You have to apply a confidence interval to these things. You have to do that, or else, you have partial information. You don't have the full picture. So a little bit of work, but it's worth it.
Don't get me started on health and safety and pseudoscience, because I'll be here for a while. Okay, so that sounds awesome. Can you just give us some examples of what some of those questions might have been, if you don't mind? It might be helpful to hear.
Yeah. So basically, the questions would have been, do you feel, or do you agree with the level of training you received? Would you agree that you fully understand your roles and responsibilities per your position? Do you trust your leader? Would you agree that you trust your leader to do things safely? Do you agree that you have your voice to participate in decisions in safety? Do you agree that you're recognized positively for your safety efforts? Do you agree that the work environment, in your opinion, is it safe, proper lighting, that kind of thing? So it was 27 questions across to really assess behavior, work environment, accountability, and culture. So the 27 questions fall into any one of those categories. And then, so those were you roll up, and then you would have seen an overall view in any one of those categories based on the responses.
Very cool. Honestly, that reminds me so much. I was speaking to Heather McDougall at Amazon not that long ago, and I know they have their safety leadership index, which is surveys that every Amazon employee has to complete every single day, regardless of if they're using a scanner in a warehouse or whatever. That comes up.
Oh.
And I think it's exactly the same thing, except they're looking at as far as kind of a rolling, ongoing opportunity to collect information. So very, very cool that you guys are working on that.
Yeah, I would love to get to that stage. Right now, baby steps make. So we do have annual surveys for overall performance culture that comes from the Global Support Center in Houston. But this was specifically with a deeper dive into, I wanted to know or measure the perception of the employee safety within Canada to see if we have any work to do there, because, trust and perception, you could have the best strategies in the world. If the culture is not there and people don't trust you, you're wasting time.
Yeah, it was one of the things that I thought was so insightful when I was speaking to Heather about this, is that it made so much sense to me that they use those surveys, even though it says safety right in the name. They're fundamentally leadership surveys, and they see safety as a symptom of good leadership. And
it is.
Whatever the results were, they use that as a way to trigger training, largely for whoever the submitter's leader was, if they saw a gap.
Yeah, no, you're right. I worked for a large organization and reported into the president based out of Philadelphia. And he used to speak to me at the end of the month before he would speak to his leaders. And they would have their monthly review, and he would tell them, if you can't manage safety, if you can't get safety right, how could you get anything else right? So he used it. Maybe it may not have been the best way how he did it, but I understand why he did it. He used that information, the safety performance, as a performance metric on their leadership.
Yeah, makes tons of sense. Tons of sense. Now, I don't want to push too hard here, but is there anywhere we could, or there would be a copy of those questions if other people want to use them, if they think it could help their organization? Should they read that book?
No, they should read the book. Yeah. So the questions is not. Yeah. So the questions is my questions based on it. But what the book says is, and anything with surveys, define your questions on what you need to know. So I can provide the questions. It's not a secret.
Yeah.
But I designed those questions based on what I needed to know. One size does not fit all. So it may be misleading. It may be a little bit dangerous to even provide the questions. And then how come I'm not getting the same result? Because it's not one size fit all. And the most dangerous thing about a survey is be careful what you wish for. When you ask the question and you get the answers, you need to be able to act on those answers, because then you erode every other survey you're going to do after. Yeah. So I would recommend, in short, read the book. The Emperor Has No Hard Hat. for achieving real workplace safety results. Alan Cooley, amazing.
Okay, awesome. And maybe we'll talk after we do the recording. And I'd love to, again, maybe if you have those questions and you don't mind sharing them, shove them in the show notes. Lots of disclaimers. Results are not proven.
That's fine.
All right. So here, you've talked a lot, and it's very refreshing to hear. But again, around this kind of intersection between safety and leadership, and obviously the show's called Safety Leaders Now, so that's something we're excited to talk about. Mm-hmm. So maybe to bridge this gap, I'm going to try and create a segue here. Hopefully it works. Okay. I want to talk about, some of these tools that you've talked about being so impactful, whether that be doing this economic planner. Also, I guess you'd probably have to have some conversations to even get the clearance to do something like these perception surveys.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what's your approach when you want to pitch something like this or present that to leadership so that their eyes don't glaze over? Because I think a lot of people, when the safety guy goes to talk, that's when you go get coffee.
Yeah. So there's two things that every safety professional need to know. Not because it's important to you, it's important to them. So learn your business cases. You have to present a clear return on investment, preferably using return on investment tools that they are familiar with. Your internal rate of return, your net present value, and how much time it takes to actually recover or invest the money. Basically, our job is to I have to convince Joe that he needs to invest his $10 in me, and I will give him his 10% return on that. Why should Joe give me his $10 when he could put it in an investment instrument and get more money back? Don't take it for granted that because we're coming to talk about safety, that you don't have to present a business case. We are not the exceptions to the rule. Everybody else needs to do the same thing. And good organizations, strong organizations, follow this business case model. And it works in two ways. You could convince them to give you the investment, or two, it actually helps as an analysis. When you're going through that business case, in your assessment, you may determine, oh, hold up, this is not going to give me the return that I thought in my mind that it was going to bring. So it brings you down to reality. So that's the first thing. When I speak, because I speak with this in mind, they now listen. The second thing, which is equally important, I think even more important, learn to communicate. So I have my notes here. I don't want to be off. Daniel Goleman wrote a Harvard Business Review article, September 2008, called Social Intelligence and the Biology of Leadership. Great. It actually tells you the biochemistry of good leaders. How do you convince people? Then Robert Cialdini, The Science of Persuasion. I use that all the time. Now, that is my secret sauce. So I'm hoping some key people that I work with don't listen to this and others listen to it, because then they're going to say, that's what this guy does to me. And basically, the science and behavioral safety and persuasion, they talk about using tools as reciprocity. Mm-hmm. I will normally give you a favor first, and then the favor is just not implied or intended, but you tend to respond to me better. Scarcity. The example that they used was with the Concorde flying from Europe to New York. When the Concorde used to fly, for the younger folks, the Concorde was a plane. When they cut the Concorde from 2 flights to 1, and they package it in a way of exclusivity, sales went up. So scarcity, you want you need to be part of this. This is an elite group. You don't want to be left behind. So using that tool of scarcity, liking, if you and I have the same shared values, you and I, we talk about maritime. We already have a foundation that you and I could talk about, that working on the ocean, working on the sea. And that is a platform for me to continue using that shared experience. So if I'm trying to convince you, I will use that maritime example. And you would tend to listen to me more because we have that shared experience. If somebody likes to fish, somebody likes to golf, if somebody likes to hunt, if there's a shared interest, you know, those people tend to have that interest, to get more respect, they listen to you. Social proof, if it works, it works. Peer pressure is a hell of a thing.
The gift of going second.
And I like that. You know, consistency. Say what you mean what you say, be consistent, be bold, be honest, be brave. You know, don't be afraid to make mistakes and own up to it. I made a mistake, I'm sorry, this is how I'm going to fix it. As a safety professional, you want to get your leadership to jump in on anything, understand the communication practice. Key to leadership, a leader with no followers is just somebody going for a walk. Daniel Kahneman, he did work on heuristics. And basically heuristics is, you know, different anchors in the brain: availability, anchoring, representatives, and effect. So just as an example, anchoring, people will anchor a memory or a thought to an action, and that will create a different reaction. So for example, if you know there's a stretch of highway that is extremely dangerous, and we all know that, you know, we tend to behave differently when we're on that stretch of highway because we remember that this highway is notorious for deaths on the highway, that kind of thing. So using these tools, understanding your audience, it can't be by guess. Have your facts, because some people are very factual and there's nothing you could do to convince them otherwise. Have your executive sponsors. Socialize this with, I like to go with the CEO, the CFO first, or somebody who have that purse strings.
If you get the CFO on board, it's a done deal.
90% battle is over.
Yeah.
So have that executive sponsor using these tools before you pitch it. So when you walk into that room where you're going to pitch that idea, your executive sponsor has already socialized it with the decision makers in that social group. You're already there. And then present the facts. So
no, I was just going to say that's I think you've hit on something that well, first of all, I want to thank you for sharing some of this, because I think these types of tactical insights are exactly what we're trying to share on the show, to take folks who, again, might be coming from a field safety perspective and are trying to build their career to simply understand, how do you navigate a more executive management environment, and how are you effective in that space? This is amazing tactical stuff. I hope all of our listeners are taking notes. But it raises a question in me, and I would just say, and I hope that the example can be valuable for people, is where did you build this skill set? Because you're talking, where did that come from?
Yeah, trial, error, falling down, bruising my knee. It wasn't, it wasn't, I wish I could say that I'm some genius. It was a lot of trial and error. You know, my own hubris, arrogance, it was terrible. Coming from the field and thinking one thing, but then something switched. Started to listen to people. You may not like the feedback you're getting. It may rub you the wrong way, but you see, listening to people, truly listening to people, and taking the constructive feedback or even the criticism. Remove your ego and look at it objectively. That's when it started to change. But the biggest thing that changed my approach technically was when I did my MBA. Doing the MBA, you understood the business perspective and then tied it in. So listening to people before the official MBA, listening to people, courses, training, development. Human beings is what's in it for us, right? So if you understand what's in it for you, or when you're delivering that message, what's in it for that person. I am not going to deliver a message to you with what's the benefit to me, because that has nothing to do with you. So once you understand what does Joe like to do? So if Joe, and this is more for frontline, but it works for the senior people as well. If Joe likes to go skiing, but he's working recklessly on the job and he gets hurt, I'm not going to tell Joe, you need to work safer. I'm going to talk to you about skiing, why you like skiing. Have you ever thought of, if you do enjoy yourself here, how is that going to affect your skiing? Or how is that going to affect your baseball game or your soccer tournament? And then start that conversation. How many people depending on you? Do you have pets depending on you? How is that going to impact their life if you can't function properly? So now it becomes about their benefit. Using that tool to the senior leaders is the same. A little different, a little more polished, but it's the same thing. You're not going to present this to them with your preconceived benefit. It's still a benefit. Win-win. Once you get it across, it doesn't matter who benefits from it, but you have to approach it with what's in it for them. Because they are human beings just like us. They have to answer to the organization just like us, and they have to sell the same. And again, you have to convince them, why should they invest their $10 in you? And what's the return to the organization? What's the return to them? So that was prior, and then doing the MBA and doing the, reading, research, all of these things is important. Read the Harvard Business Review. Just don't read safety journals. Read things on behavioral sciences. Read things.
Safety journals as little as possible.
There's also some good technical insight there, but again, I will read a safety journal and get all excited, and my safety peer will get all excited. Okay. And who's that going to help? I'm not selling to my safety peer. We already get it. That's our Jones. So you have to speak the language of the persons who you're speaking to. And if I'm speaking safety and they're speaking business, money, and we're not tying that in, we're speaking two different languages, the conversation is already dead. Since learning that, I could guarantee any safety professional listening, once you take that approach, they will listen to you. It's not that everything is going to get approved, but they're going to take you more seriously and understand that you have the business objectives at heart.
Mm. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. You were talking about Influence, the Science of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And I think that's what you're talking about here. That's such a core skill for any leader. Doesn't matter what you're the director of or the VP of. Correct. You need to be able to influence people. And I think that's one of those things that I have certainly routinely seen as maybe something that often people don't think enough about, because especially safety professionals can rely so much on the moral high ground that they sometimes have challenges around that kind of influence side of things.
Yeah, we get lazy. Let's face it. We get lazy. We have the moral high ground, and we hug that moral high ground, and we use that for everything. We get lazy. Then some of us use the legal high ground. That's lazy.
Yeah.
We need to do more than that. It's not just about the moral high ground.
I think I can already tell. I think we're going to make a clip of that and put that on LinkedIn so we can get you in trouble.
That's fine. That's okay. That's okay. I welcome that kind of trouble. That's good trouble. That sparks good conversations and have people thinking differently.
I honestly, I could not agree more. I think that kind of evolution of thought, and I think a lot of the things that I'm hearing in some of these safety conversations, I very much feel it's part of the reason we have this show, that we're on kind of a tipping point right now of, I think, a lot of people changing this approach and evolving this. So this actually transitions nicely into one of the questions that I like to ask here, which is there, personally, I'm of the belief that the safety space is ripe for some changes. Is there, if you had to pick one thing to change about the safety industry, whether it be something that people focus on too much or something that, you just systematically see as an opportunity for some low-hanging fruit, is there anything that springs to mind?
Well, that's a loaded question, because there's not one thing I would change. And some of it, in fairness, is just pet peeves. When I look at, and you can't change the past, but you have to acknowledge it. When I look at how safety evolved in some countries, it's somebody who got injured They didn't have anything else better for them to do. And they say, go, you be that guy, because you can tell people what not to do because look, you're already injured. And that evolved, in a way that we were not seen as professional. And let me qualify that. If I want to do any trade, or if I want to do any profession, lawyer, doctor, that kind of thing, I need to officially go to school, preferably an accredited school, understand the theoretical piece. Then I get experience, whether it's a trade or a doctor, who I call a very glorified tradesperson that works on human beings. A lawyer, they have to go to court, but they have somebody guiding them, but they have the theoretical knowledge. In safety, it appears to be reversed. People work in the field, and I am part of that, right? I worked in the field, somebody said, right? And then we went and do it. So it's not all a bad thing, but what you have a lot of people in the organization try to do safety only from the lens of their experience. And they have some senior people because they've been doing it so long. They only do safety from the lens of their experience and not from the theoretical profession that, from the CRSP, the Columbian Southern University. These are courses that you have. University of Fredericton, New Brunswick. My education is from the UK, so NIBOSH. Learning the different theoretical safety is physics, chemistry, biology, behavioral science. It's tools you have to learn. And if you never had that official formal learning, you would know about the science of persuasion. You would know these things. You would know about the RI. So I guess the low-hanging fruit would be, we need to change how we educate young safety professionals. There's something in our education system when we're training safety people. I think we're missing the business aspect. I think we're missing the actual formal education. And then we add the experience on it, or it's a combined thing. I think we really need to look at that, because you have safety professionals coming out and you meet with them. And I guess maybe I was there one time and I'm being overly critical, but I've met some of them brilliant, and I've met some of them, they talk about hard hat, safety glasses, wearing safety shoes, and they're not strategic in nature. This is a safety profession. We need to earn the respect of our peers. And we have a lot of people who just complain, point out faults, don't provide solutions, and it's narrow because it's how they were taught. So that's one of the things that I would change, how we need to relook at the education, the curriculum. Is it practical for today's world, for today's business? Are we talking about just culture, the works of Sidney Decker, Andrew Sharman, Kernahan? Are we talking about Dr. Tim Marsh? Are we including those thought leaders into the curriculum? Alan Quilly, for example. Alan Quilly had it in his book, The Emperor Has No Hard Hat. We put this great emphasis on audits, and audits has its value, but you're auditing a system. So if something takes 15 steps, you're compliant. But at the edge of 10 steps, it's a cliff. So I make 15 steps and I fall off the cliff and I die, but guess what? I'm still compliant. So there's not a practical nature in really understanding the objective. That's one. But you're right, I agree. Safety, this podcast is amazing, talking with different thought leaders, professionals. I think we need to hear that. I think safety professionals or budding safety professionals need to hear people from outside of their field. We need to widen the conversation, and that only then I think we'll get the respect. Because what happens, and this is a pet peeve, I have no science in this whatsoever. In my experience, everybody thinks they know safety, and everybody tends to tell safety people what they think they should be doing. And you know, you think safety should be doing this or safety should be doing that, or, you know, and I want my inside voice normally wants to tell them is, do I tell you how to do your job? Will you go into a physician's office, and when the physician tells you this is what you need to do, you tell the physician, no, I think you should be doing this instead. You're not going to do that. You're not going to go into any court of law and pretend you're a lawyer. Why you want to pretend to be a safety professional?
Do you have any theories as to why everybody? I do, but do you have any theories as to why everybody feels so comfortable weighing in?
I have two reasons. One, safety at its core is a core behavior, and I hate to use the word common sense, because common sense is not a common thing. Common sense is only common among the people who share that common knowledge. But everybody thinks it's common. To be safe is common. So that's nothing. You know, I think that is one way. But the second thing, my second theory of that, and this may gain some criticism, is we in the profession allow that to happen. Because of the same thing I went back to that I alluded to earlier. It's we came through experience, and we didn't demonstrate the technical competencies that's truly associated with this profession. And therefore people just figure, well, yeah, you know what, anybody could do it.
Yeah.
You know, I could be wrong, but that's just my take on it. We were lazy. We didn't clearly demonstrate the tools, the theories, the applications that make us who we are. And people just figure, I don't know, what's your thoughts on it?
They're varied. I think partially what you're talking about here, at least to my understanding, is in practice, the symptom of this problem is that people can't look at things from a first principles perspective, because they're so tied into where they are and their experience and all these other things. And without broader theoretical knowledge, it's probably difficult to even conceptualize what those first principles are.
That's true. That makes a lot of sense.
And I think there's also an element of the fact that safety is currently only measured by failure and has no real quantifiable measurement of success. So it's very difficult to say somebody's doing a good job or are they just getting lucky. And I think that's, but that's like something that everybody intuitively understands, because we've all had a safety guy who we all knew wasn't that good, but we didn't have any incidents. And I think that there's a measurement between not measuring anything and using, reportable injuries as the primary arbiter of success, that I think we need to do more to measure in the middle.
And that goes back to the education piece, because I like that point. We're starting on the premise that we measure our success by failure. Yeah. We're not looking at measuring success of integrating into the business objective. So you have these looking good indexes. So all the charts and talk about recordable rates, and that drives me mad. I'll be honest with you, when everybody talking about recordable rates and all of this is failure, this is after the fact. This is a result. There is nothing here we could talk about. We need to talk about the inputs. What are we doing to change that result? But nobody wants to hear that.
I think nobody wants to hear it because, again, I have some thesis around this, it's partially just a resource constraint issue, is that to measure all the things that would tell us if we're being successful, nobody has the resources to do that today. And it's currently unproven as to what we should be measuring. That's a whole separate conversation. I think that that's where it's going to get to a place where we can say in a quantifiable way, look at all these successes we've had and look at the data we have to support all the decision guidance we've provided, to go back to what we talked about earlier. But anyway, that's
no, that's a good point.
That's like I said, we could, I don't know, next time I'm in Edmonton, we can sit down and talk about that.
Oh yeah, all day.
With that, is there anything you want to kind of get out there? You've shared so many amazing points and you've come so amazingly prepared. Is there anything you want to put out there before we wrap things up? Anything we haven't covered?
I'm sure there's things we haven't covered, but what I want to put out there is, if we are professionals, let's be professional. Put in the work and the research. Nobody, and I don't want to say nobody, that's the wrong thing to say. Not because you know it's correct means that somebody's going to listen to you and agree with you. If you put something out there, you better be sure that you have your references to support what you're saying. Do the work. It's not easy. If we all do the work, if we learn how to communicate and we come with our facts supported by objective evidence, research out there. There's a lot of smart people doing a lot of good research out there. I think the profession will be elevated, and individually you will be successful. I guess that's the only thing additional I want to put out there.
Awesome. Well, I think, again, maybe just to wrap things up, I want to thank you for joining us. I've certainly really enjoyed this conversation. I think there's a ton of stuff here that people are going to get a lot of value from. So thank you, Kirwin, and I'm looking forward to having you back.
Hey, I appreciate that. You know what? Anytime.
All right. Well, thank you for making it all the way through the episode. I just wanted to mention again, this podcast is brought to you by Opslock. Opslock is the new way to keep your team safe at work. We're basically the most modern and advanced health and safety tool out there. If that sounds interesting to you, one of the things that we're offering to listeners of this podcast is free access to our workplace observations tool, meaning that you can roll out a digital workplace observations tool in your company, no matter what the size is, for free. If that sounds interesting or you just want to learn a little bit more, go to our website, opslock.com, fill out the Get a Demo form, let us know that you heard about us on the podcast, and someone, probably me, will set up a call with you. So anyway, that's it. Thanks a lot for listening through the episode, and I hope you have a great day.